To the Bone, the podcast that goes deeper. Here we cut through the noise and get straight to the core of the issues that matter. From real stories to raw truths, we dive deep into the conversations that shape our world and challenge our thinking. We're not afraid to dig in and get to the marrow of it all. Whether it's life, culture, or business in sports medicine, we're here to break it down raw and real. No filters, no fluff, just to the bone. With your host, Shelby Daly, we're getting to the bone. Let's get started. Welcome back. It's To the Bone with Shelby Daly, ATC. Are there more letters that we should be throwing in there when we introduce you?
I mean, there is quite a list, but I like to keep it simple.
All right. That's fine. So anyway, this is all things athletic training and the business of athletic training. And right now, this is the book club portion of the To the Bone podcast. And we're talking about Never Split the Difference, Negotiating as If Your Life Depended on It by Chris Voss with help from, what is that? Hamal Raz? Tall.
I think it's something like that.
Tall. T-A-H-L. Tall Raz. Oh, well, man.
He should have negotiated for bigger letters.
I could put my glasses on, but then there's the glares. So, yes, this is To the Bone. Shelby Daly, athletic trainer. I'm just here to help out and keep the conversation going, because it's funny when you're sitting in a room talking to yourself, especially when you answer. So I'm here to keep things sane.
And your name is Randy.
Oh, it is. Randy Daly. Same last name. No extra letters, D-A-L-Y. And we're up to chapter 2. So for the attention deficit that have already fallen by the wayside, good luck. But we'll give you a reason to come back with more content. So in chapter 2, we're talking about the mirror. All right. So I'm going to let you start off this time. Tell me about the mirror.
Well, as he mentioned, the Jedi mind tricks.
Jedi mind tricks?
Yeah. Mirroring is how you present your body language to the other person, basically replicating how they're presenting themselves.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we touched on that last time about basic human communications. And so there is all of the things that we use in communication, how we're, this tells us we're not going to listen, the resting face, cuts off communication. So there are techniques to increase communication, and that is where the mirroring comes in, correct?
Yep. So usually we say body language or inflections in your voice, but he actually goes into repeating what they say also.
I thought that was interesting. Yeah, because I noticed that when I was out. So if you're in Kenai and you need a donut, the place to go is the Glaze. So my buddy and I, Scott, went over there and we were trying it out. And they're still in construction phase, so it's kind of exciting to be there when there's bare concrete. And we couldn't even get coffee because the electrician hadn't shown up to make sure that the coffee machine worked. So it's very early. But I noticed while I was sitting there listening and talking with Scott that I think this is just something that I developed when I was in sales, is I'd be sitting there and he'd have his arm on the back of the chair next to him, and I would realize that I had my arm on the chair next to me and like totally mirroring his body language. But in the book, they take it to a whole nother level of mirroring, and that's what you were just touching on.
Yeah. And even trying to influence the other person to be more willing to connect with you and how you reflect back what they're doing and being a positive and energetic voice back to them.
Right. And so that was the mirroring in even the conversation where and this particular chapter starts off with kind of an exciting premise. Typically what he does is he'll tell you about a real world negotiating scenario that he found himself in. And this one is, the classic guys going to hold up a bank. They end up with hostages, tellers, and security officers. And now they got to get, hopefully, all those people out in a peaceful enough solution that people don't end up dying. So it's an exciting way to start the chapter. And that's what he talks about is in the mirroring, the hostage taker would say something, and then he would even just repeat the demand back with kind of like a question mark so that the guy could talk more. So it's that whole, in the sales world, we call it open-ended questioning, but he's using it as a mirroring technique to get more conversation. That was fascinating.
Yeah. Well, then he mentioned at the beginning was going into the negotiation, you should obviously understand what you want out of it, but you shouldn't go with any preconceived notions. Take out all your biases and what you're thinking in your head, because the active listening portion is the biggest part of trying to figure out what they want from their inflections and what they're saying. I mean, even going into this, I wanted to say all these different points, and then I'm not really listening to you. I am now, but you know, it's
don't listen to me. You're the star. You're the one this show's about. I'm just a guy.
I'm having these multiple conversations trying to figure out what I want to say, where, you know, it takes away from the conversation between you and me. It's a little bit more disconnect that way.
Well, and they address that in the book too. They talk about, okay, and we touched on this last time, is, you know, when you're effectively listening, and they say, well, you know, listening's easy. You just have to concentrate. It's like, well, no. One, effective listening in this scenario, they had 4 or 5 people listening on the phones, trying to make sure that they were getting all the nuances. You got one guy listening for this nuance, and that guy listening for this thing, and this guy listening for, you know, background noise or cues. So there was that. And then the piece that I really appreciated is that they built on that. They said, and not only when you're listening is there an issue with trying to focus on what the other person is saying, is they talked about it, and they said, really smart people often have trouble being negotiators. They're so smart, they think they don't have anything to discover. So there's that cognitive bias. And then they also talked about the 7 different conversations that could be potentially happening inside your head at any given time. So you may be focused 100% on this guy, but then there's also the other things that you're supposed to be thinking about while you're listening to him. So it's like, as they said, like 4 people talking simultaneously and trying to effectively listen to that. I thought that was awesome information.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think it was, we can only really concentrate on 7 points at a time. I think that's what he was saying. But yeah, I mean, but that gives you a good way of going into the conversation of, okay, I have all this things I want to accomplish. If I can make sure I make those points 7 points or less, there is a better ability of them to actually recognize what I'm trying to say, because they'll remember at least the majority of those 7 points.
Well, and that's, it's, and I would say that it's not even trying to get the 7 points across. It's, you know, you want to work on one thing at a time. It's how many things can the individual who is attempting to listen to this, you know, I think the point they made is like at 7, that's where you become overwhelmed and you're just like, I'm going to go sit under the desk with my head tucked between my knees, and I don't want to deal with any more of the world because I've got too many things to deal with so far.
Yeah. Well, I had seen something a while ago, and I was trying to find it to reference for today. But I mean, we basically have goldfish minds now of, you know, with marketing and social media posts, you really only capture somebody's attention in the first 3 to 5 seconds. After that, if you don't capture it, they're usually kind of checked out. I would hope going into negotiations, you're a little bit more aware of what's going on. But, you know, with the social media world that we live in, I think our attention has become narrower.
And I would agree. I've seen it myself, and that even when I sit down to do the reading for preparing for this podcast, it's like, wow, 15 minutes, and I'm like already thinking about other things that are pinging off. And of course, if you're sitting there and your phone's on the table next to you, and, you know, your buddy JD that you haven't talked to in 10 years is like, hey, man, I thought I'd reconnect with you. It's like, hey, JD, great to hear from you. But I was trying to read over here. And then the other one on the cognitive bias that comes into play here that I like that they brought up, and I underlined it. I thought it was that powerful, is until you know what you're dealing with, you don't know what you're dealing with. Yep. So it's like, oh, well, that's a no-brainer, but I hadn't thought of it in those terms. You really, you know, if you go in there thinking you know everything, you're going to deal with it differently than if you go in there thinking, I don't know everything. Let's find out what we're dealing with. And then you'll know what you're dealing with.
Yeah. Well, and I think in our family sense, you know, we might get a little heated, and we're, getting a little aggravated about certain things, and it's not really that certain thing, it's just that we haven't eaten that day. Something non-related at all to what's actually going on is, hey, we just haven't really drank water or eaten anything.
No, nobody I know would become hangry for any reason. We're always rational adults.
So,
Okay. So it's page 28 is your 7 points.
Okay.
We can process only about 7 pieces of information in our conscious mind at any given moment. In other words, we're easily overwhelmed. Yeah. Anyway, if you need to join me under the desk later, come on in, but bring snacks.
And then I think the next point after that, after you wipe your mind, is just slowing down the conversation and trying to tame the other person's animalistic mind. Because obviously, I don't think they would have read this book going into negotiations. So you're going to have to be kind of director of how the conversation moves.
Well, yeah, obviously. But the other piece of it on the effective listening was allowing the other person to slow down. And I made notes on that too. They talk about slow down and just, we're sometimes so interested in where we want the conversation to go and what our demands are, that sometimes we need to allow the other person to spend more time telling us what they're looking for and what they're wanting to get as a resolution. So this, again, going back to the goldfish mind where we got I got 15 seconds of information, I got to get it out there, and I got to get to the resolution in 20 seconds, or otherwise, I'm going to go somewhere else. So sometimes you just have to slow down, and along with that, you can tune into the smooth sounds of the DJ voice. Apparently, that's a thing too.
The different tones of voice bringing calming effects.
Yeah, so they talked about it. They talked about the DJ voice and how we when you're having a conversation and you're ending your sentences like on the uplift, that is a request for more information, and it even though it may be happy, it's causing the other person a reaction. So the DJ voice, if you think about the guy spinning the late night tunes, the easy listening, cool groove to get you through the night. If you put the inflection down and take your voice down a little bit and slow down, it allows the other person, again, the ability to calm down and
be more
give
thoughtful.
more exposition. Right.
Yeah. Well, I was thinking about that portion of the slowdown and trying to be the problem solver of the situation also. So obviously you want to learn as much as you can from the other person on what is important to them, what are their worries, and what's not working for them in this plan of negotiation. And so trying to slow it down and gather that information and then providing solutions and showing that you're willing to work with them with what they need, and your need or what you're trying to negotiate for may be what is everything they need. You just need to pull that information out of them, and that kind of takes away some of the tensions of the unsurety of, well, is this actually going to fit together? So, I think we get caught up on moving people quickly to making a decision, that we try to prepare as much as we can before the situation, but I don't know if we're necessarily preparing in the best ways. And this made me think about negotiations and hiring. I know that you've hired a lot of people at High Speed Gear, the company you owned for 20 years? Is that what it was?
Oh, yes. Too many to count.
But I was going to pose the question, if somebody came in with a compensation or benefits resume of what they were kind for or expecting, do you think that would help you in the negotiation process of having it written down and be able to think about it before. Because usually, like, one of the big topics of today is the transparency of job postings and how much people are getting paid. A lot of that seems very hidden, or they provide these weird ranges where you don't know where you actually qualify on the range. If somebody came into a job interview and provided a resume of what they're expecting on compensation or different benefits that they'd like to explore to offset, how would you take that as an employer?
Well, there's so yes, you want ultimately we need to get back to hiring highly qualified individuals. That's just a given. We've gone down the rabbit hole on a whole bunch of things that have absolutely nothing to do with providing quality and providing value both to the employer and to our customers. And the way you do that is that you provide competent employees that can communicate the company's credo in the way that they do day-to-day business. All right. And so that's, they like to make the comparisons between, they like to use Apple a lot of time because Apple communicates what they're about very well. And it doesn't have to do with the price of the product. It doesn't have, it's what their credo is, because there are arguably faster computers than an Apple. There are arguably better interfaces for various jobs than an Apple. It's not that they are the best at everything. They are the best at communicating what they are about. And so people like what they're about, what they stand for, and they have a much better relationship with their client base than probably any other computer manufacturer out there. That's what sets Apple apart, is they set themselves apart from the rest. So when it comes to hiring, yes, we want competent people, but it also goes back to the negotiating. We had touched on it in the previous chapter when we talked about my theory that one of the reasons that we don't do well in negotiating in the United States is because we're not going to the spice market and negotiating. And in the book, the guy actually talks about going to a spice market and being amazed. He's the professional negotiator, but his girlfriend is out negotiating him in the spice market every time they go there. And so that's when they start talking about, the ability to negotiate sometimes come down to the interpersonal skills. So you may have one guy who's got a better resume, but the other person has better interpersonal skills and a better ability to get other people to trust and communicate with them. And that is going to be far superior for helping them move forward in the company to achieve the things that they want. Because in his discussion of the spice market, he talks about, here's how she would do it. And so even though you're dealing with, and I've been in some of these situations where you're walking through these marketplaces and they're just very aggressive trying to get you to make a transaction. But where she was successful is that she talked in a positive and playful voice, which for me, it's just not my personality. I mean, I can be positive and playful, but somehow, we have that switch sometimes that goes off. Oh, well, this is a professional setting, so now we have to be RBF, and we have to be professional, and we have to be reserved, and all of those things actually can be counterproductive to actually getting a good negotiation to happen. So in this case, he had a voice of an easygoing, good-natured person. And so she was able to use that when negotiating with these guys who negotiate every hour of their lives in their business in these spice markets. And she was able to get better outcomes than the highly trained professional FBI anti-terrorist negotiator. He had the better resume. She had better results.
Well, I think also they had mentioned that she treated it like a game. I mean,
right.
The pressure of negotiating with terrorists is a little different than, I need some cumin for my tacos or something like that. So, I mean, I think the pressure obviously plays a little bit different, but I mean, I think that's, as I've grown as a professional, going into interviews, I don't really prepare anymore because I treat it as a conversation. I had different experiences, and it should be a good fit for both of us. So that takes off some of the tension of, oh my God, I need to impress them because I need to make money and get this job. I don't really care about anything else that they're providing, and the culture, or if it's a bad leadership structure or any of that stuff. So I think that's where some people need to take a step back. And it's, we've talked about opportunity cost and how some people just need a job and they're going to do anything they need for it, which kind of weighs down on the rest of the profession to an extent, on salary ranges and all that stuff.
Well, and again, it's very rarely are you and I going to be called on to negotiate with terrorists. I'm from the school that's like, yeah, we'll just call in an airstrike and negotiations are over. I mean, that's what the Marines taught me. Naval gunfire, air support, A-10, whatever. That's how we deal with negotiation. Well, that's not real world anymore. The Marines sent me a T-shirt and said, please go away. So, we're done there when I asked to go back to them. But anyway, so the approach to the encounter is not, oh my God, this is going to be like negotiating for lives with terrorists or people holding up a bank. The girl in the spice market always went at it as if it was a game, and it was fun, and it wasn't anything that is life-threatening. And that's the thing. In the U.S., very rarely are we in a situation where we're negotiating for something as valuable as a human life. So we have the ability, we have the luxury where we step back a little bit and say, hey, let's see if we can have some fun with this and get what we want. And at the end of it, if we didn't, well, we'll go back and we'll figure something else out. I mean, that was in this scenario where they're trying to get these bank robbers out. They're 5 hours into it and they're just finally figuring out that their preconceived notions, the knowledge they thought they had because they thought they knew something, was what was keeping them from negotiating a positive resolution of the conflict. So it's that, sometimes we're too smart for our own good, and they talk about that. And if we could be, I mean, just think about how much better life would be if we could always be a little bit more, hey, this is just an enjoyable, but sometimes it catches us off guard. So it's that, okay, can we slow down? Can we slide into the late night DJ voice? And can we get things to resolve in a much more positive way? I think we'd all like that a whole lot more.
Yeah. Well, do you feel like you slip into your country radio show host voice ever in certain situations?
Well, I think it's, I have noticed, and I was worried about it for a while, in that when I am spending time with various people and they have, kind of a different way of talking. So whether it's when I went to England and I started realizing I was starting to develop a little bit of a accent on certain words, or I was doing some training, and the instructor, he's a very, very successful business person, but the way he would do some of his punchlines is he would pop his voice up into a little bit of a falsetto, and I was like, then I'm talking to your mother, and I'm like, oh my God, I just did a Jerry Royce. What the heck? So I think, part of my personality apparently is that I will naturally do the mirroring, even though I don't, like I said, when I'm Scott, I'm like physically mirroring him while we're having donuts. Now I'm listening to podcasts or instructional videos, and I'm starting to mimic the instructor. And when I visit other countries, it's terrible when you send me to Central America because, one, I don't speak Portuguese or Spanish, so I end up with a bad accent on my English, and I don't even know how to communicate in that language. It's actually kind of funny to watch.
Yeah, so I was just wondering about that, since you were a radio show host for the local station, for the country station, and is the presentation of, well, I'm on a country radio station, I need that to survive.
And the crazy thing is, so it's the morning. I was morning drive time with the country station. So in the morning, I'd have a little bit of a twang when I was speaking sometimes when I was doing that. But then at about 11 o'clock in the morning, I would switch over and I'd go over to talk radio, and we'd be talking about politics and everything else. And my voice would be slightly different in there. And And I wish I had read this book when I was talking to some people in talk radio, because there were times it's about control. And when you're trying to communicate, it's, the mirroring, what the mirroring is attempting to address is the fear that we have of things that are unusual or unknown to us. So the mirroring makes us feel more like we are the person that we're trying to communicate with, and so that they can then start to trust and be transparent with us. The one downside to radio is when you're talking to somebody on the other end and they are just going on their 3.5 minutes into their tirade, and you're like, I'd be like, hey, hey, hey. And so it was that lack of control. When what turned out to be a whole lot more effective is I would stop talking, and then they would go, "Are you still there?" I said, "Yes, you said I would interrupt you, and I'm not interrupting you." Well, and they were like out of gas at that point, So, so there's that, and then obviously, the ability to actually turn them down and go to a break if you need to. But
Yeah.
yeah, if you're trying to communicate with people, the mirroring, and that can be, as we talked about, the cues, the physical cues. It can be the way you use your voice, the terms that you start using, if you're using words that they are familiar with. All of that can help build that trust and that ability to have some commonality. And that is what they're talking about in here, getting to a positive end to negotiations. Now, one of the ones that they talked about in this chapter was the waiter. Tell me about the waiter and how you make more money as a service employee.
Well, they did a study, and it was two different waiters, groups of waiters. One group performed positive reinforcement, so, oh, that's a great order. That's the best wine we have. Nice choice. Those type of reinforcements. Where the other group sat and mirrored back the three words, the three critical words of whatever they're saying. So basically just repeating back the order to make sure they got it correct. And the waiters actually had 70% more tips when they mirrored back, just repeating back what they said or the order, compared to just confirming that it was a good plate or glass of wine or something like that. So I don't know if it's a confirmation of what somebody's saying, but it seems to work in the money department for tips.
Well, there you go. So how much more?
70%.
70% better tips. Man, that, when I start looking at what we're tipping out these days, that is a significant amount of money. Holy cow. That could make the difference.
Yeah. So in an interview situation, I'm not quite sure how that would possibly work, since most of the time it's a question answer portion. But I guess the elaboration and learning more about the question that they're asking by repeating it back to them may be the way to go.
Well, and that is how you get to clarity. When I was down in the Strand in San Diego taking the water safety survival instructor course for the Marines. They use Red Cross training to teach that course. So you ended up not only being certified to be able to teach in the Marine Corps, but you also were Red Cross certified. And so one of the things that you did, and that was when you were learning how to be an instructor, was that you repeated back the question and then asked specifically, is that what you were asking? So if you're conducting a class, especially in an environment like water safety survival, you're treading water for a half hour, and it's like, okay, how about we get the answers correct? So you don't want to stress the individual any more than that they're already physically and mentally stressed, and they ask a question. Now, I understand you're asking, and just repeating it back help to clarify the question, and then you can provide an answer if needed. Now, obviously, in the waiting situation, you don't have that problem because it's just making sure the order's right. But it gives a confirmation, positive confirmation that, one, the person was listening, cared about you, and then again, if we throw in there a smooth voice, a playful attitude, those things, maybe that's how you can be even more successful, whether it's in a negotiation for a position, a raise, or better work environments, or a new project to make the AT community better.
Yeah. Well, and I think even doing injury evaluations is another way to enact this mirroring portion. If you're having trouble with patient relations, or they don't feel like they're getting the most out of their athletic trainer, I think in the evaluations or when you're doing treatments, if you're trying to learn more about them, you let them do the talking. So if you you don't actually have to say anything to them other than repeating back what they're saying, and you'll get a lot more out of the evaluation or the athlete if you're trying to learn about them.
Right. And then, giving them, again, that physical presence that you're open to hearing what they say. So that's going to pretty much do it for this week. We're right at where we need to be, and we don't want to read the book to them. We want them to go out and get this book and read it so they can be part of it. So this is To the Bone. Shelby Daly, athletic trainer, talking about all things athletic training. The opinions provided in this program, this podcast, are those of the people giving the podcast. We're not saying we're talking for anybody or even accurately quoting the book. Read it for yourself and find out. I'm Randy Daly. Please come back next time to The Bone, a podcast on athletic training and all things in the business by Shelby Daly. That's it for today's episode of To the Bone. I hope we sparked some new thoughts, challenged your perspectives, or simply reminded you to dig a little deeper. Remember, life isn't just about what's on the surface. Sometimes you've got to cut deeper and get to the bone of what really matters. To the Bone podcast is a product of Daly LLC. It's hosted and produced by Shelby Daly, ATC, and Randy Daly. No clinical decision-making should be based solely on one source. While care is taken to ensure accuracy, factual errors can be present. For more on the show, visit www.tothebonepodcast.com. If you enjoyed this episode, be sure to subscribe, rate, and leave a review. Get involved in the conversation. You can find us at www.tothebonepodcast.com. Drop us topic suggestions or be a potential guest. We're all about connecting with you, our listeners. Until next time, stay curious, stay grounded, and keep cutting deep.